Alison Carter never imagined the two people she trusted most, her husband, Daniel Preston, and her own mother, Lorraine, would destroy her life from the inside out. What began as a quiet family home in the suburbs unraveled into a chilling tale of betrayal, forbidden desire, and a murder that stunned an entire community. By the time the truth surfaced, one was dead, one was in prison, and a newborn child was left behind as the twisted symbol of a secret that should have never existed. Alison Carter and Daniel Preston looked like the kind of couple people envied. They met during their sophomore year of college in Eugene, Oregon. He was studying architecture. She was training to become a nurse. From the very beginning, they were inseparable. Friends described their relationship as easy, natural, like they were meant to be together. After graduation, they got married in a small but beautiful ceremony on the coast, surrounded by family and friends. Life seemed full of promise. They settled in a quiet neighborhood just outside Portland, buying a modest two-story home with a big backyard and white picket fence. Daniel landed a job at a small but growing architecture firm, while Alison began working long shifts at a local hospital. In time, they had two children, a boy and a girl, who became the center of their world. Family photos filled their home, vacations, birthdays, little league games. Everything about their life seemed normal, happy, stable. But behind the cheerful exterior, cracks had begun to form. Daniel was often distracted, frequently working late, and sometimes irritable for no apparent reason. Alison chalked it up to stress. Architecture deadlines were brutal, and with two young kids and a demanding job, she knew her own fuse was short too. But something about Daniel had changed. He smiled less. He was on his phone constantly, stepping outside to take calls or staying, locked in his home office for hours. Things got more complicated when Alison's mother, Lorraine, moved in with them. Lorraine had recently gone through a difficult divorce and was struggling financially. Alison didn't hesitate to offer her a place to stay. Lorraine had always been a strong, independent woman, stylish, outgoing, and full of energy. Despite being in her early 50s, she could easily be mistaken for someone 10 years younger. She loved being a grandmother and offered to help with the children so Alison could pick up more shifts at the hospital. At first, the arrangement worked well. The kids adored their grandmother, and Daniel seemed to get along with her. Lorraine often cooked dinner, helped with homework, and even took over some of the household chores. She was charming and warm, the kind of person who lit up any room. But as weeks turned into months, Alison began to feel like an outsider in her own home. There was an ease between Daniel and Lorraine that felt unnatural. Inside jokes, lingering eye contact, conversations that stopped when Alison entered the room. Still, she pushed away her discomfort. She didn't want to believe there was anything wrong. She blamed her imagination, telling herself she was tired and overthinking everything. But deep down, a sense of unease began to take root. Late at night, while folding laundry or nursing, her youngest back to sleep, she'd catch herself wondering if something was happening right under her nose. She just didn't know yet that the truth was far worse than anything she could have imagined. As the days turned into weeks, the subtle tension in the Preston household began to grow. Daniel and Lorraine's friendship, once easily explained by shared responsibilities and common interests, had shifted into something more difficult to ignore. Alison would often come home from her evening shifts to find them sitting together on the back patio, wine glasses in hand, whispering and laughing softly like old friends sharing secrets. When she entered the room, the mood changed. Smiles faded and conversations ended abruptly. Daniel claimed he was just being polite. Lorraine, he said, was lonely and adjusting to a difficult chapter in her life. Alison tried to accept that explanation. After all, Lorraine was her mother, and she had always been someone Alison trusted completely. But the gut feeling that something was off refused to go away. As summer rolled in, Daniel began spending more time at home under the guise of remote work. Lorraine, too, seemed to rearrange her schedule to match his. They started taking walks together, going to the grocery store as a pair, and often ran errands without telling Alison. The growing closeness between them no longer felt like coincidence. It felt calculated. But whenever Alison tried to bring it up, Daniel dismissed her concerns, insisting she was being paranoid. The turning point came one afternoon when Alison returned early from work, having been released from her shift due to low staffing needs. As she entered the house through the side door, she noticed that the living room was strangely quiet. The children were napping, and there was no sound from the kitchen. When she walked upstairs, she saw that Daniel's office door was closed, but Lorraine's bedroom door was slightly ajar. As she approached, she thought she heard soft voices and the unmistakable sound of hurried movement. But when she knocked, everything went still. Moments later, Daniel emerged from the room, shirt untucked, and gave her a startled look before brushing past her, claiming he had been fixing Lorraine's internet connection. Lorraine stayed in her room the rest of the day. No one mentioned the encounter. From that moment on, Alison knew something was deeply wrong. She started watching more closely. She noticed how Lorraine would dress differently when Daniel was home. More makeup, tighter clothes. She realized Daniel's phone was always locked now, and he no longer left it unattended. She also found receipts for expensive lunches and hotel stays billed under a shared card Daniel used for work expenses. The dates matched days when Lorraine claimed she was meeting friends in town. Still, Alison didn't confront them. Instead, she began collecting the small pieces of evidence, each one a thread in a growing web of betrayal. She told herself she needed proof, something undeniable, and then, just when she thought things couldn't get worse, Lorraine made a shocking announcement at the dinner table. She was pregnant. Alison's heart dropped. Lorraine claimed the father was someone she'd reconnected with from her past. Daniel remained stone-faced, saying nothing. But in that moment, everything made sense. The secret glances, the hidden smiles, the silence. Deep inside, Alison already knew the truth. The news of Lorraine's pregnancy cast a strange silence over the household. Alison forced a smile at the dinner table, trying to act surprised, trying to seem supportive. Lorraine went on to describe how she had recently reconnected with an old flame, someone from her college years, and that the pregnancy had been unexpected but welcome. Daniel nodded along quietly, avoiding Alison's eyes. To anyone watching, it may have looked like a modern family adjusting to an unconventional situation. But inside, Alison felt like she was drowning. In the days that followed, she found herself spiraling. Every interaction between Daniel and Lorraine now had a sinister weight. A simple glance between them felt like confirmation. Every time they were in the same room, she watched their movements carefully, like a detective trying to piece together a timeline. Still, she said nothing. She needed more than suspicion. She needed proof. Her first move was subtle. She began looking through household items for clues, receipts, notes, anything out of place. In a bathroom drawer, she found a crumpled piece of paper with a hotel's name and a room number scribbled in Daniel's handwriting. In Lorraine's dresser, she found a lipstick that wasn't her usual color, paired with a receipt from a lingerie store dated just weeks before the pregnancy announcement. Alison kept everything, carefully folding and storing the items in an old file box hidden in the back of her closet. The final straw came when she noticed the baby. A few months after the birth, Alison began seeing flashes of Daniel in the newborn's face. The way the baby's eyes curved at the corners, the distinct shape of the jawline. It was uncanny. Everyone else seemed to overlook the resemblance, but to Alison, it was undeniable. That's when she decided to take a DNA test. She waited for an afternoon when Lorraine was out of the house running errands and Daniel was at work. She took a used baby bottle, carefully sealing the nipple in a plastic bag. Then she went to the upstairs bathroom and swabbed Daniel's toothbrush. She mailed the samples under a different name, using a private testing service to avoid suspicion. The waiting was agony. Days passed like molasses. She kept going through the motions, cooking dinner, helping with homework, folding laundry, while inside she was bracing for a truth she already suspected. When the email finally came, her hands shook as she opened it. The result was irrefutable. Daniel was the biological father. Alison sat frozen at the kitchen table, staring at the screen, her stomach in knots. She wasn't angry at first. She wasn't sad. What she felt was something far colder. Clarity. The kind of cold that comes when denial finally dies. Everything made sense. The late nights, the secrets, the sudden pregnancy. Her husband had slept with her mother. And now they had a child together. But instead of confronting them immediately, Alison did something unexpected. She printed the results and placed them carefully in the box with all the other evidence. Then she closed it, locked it, and slid it back into hiding. This wasn't over yet. The days that followed were filled with eerie calm. Alison moved through her routines like nothing had changed, smiling when necessary, laughing when expected. But inside, her thoughts were sharp and focused. She watched Daniel and Lorraine more closely than ever, noting their patterns, their habits, even the smallest details. She no longer hoped for apologies or explanations. She wanted something else now: answers, consequences, and maybe even justice. Daniel continued to act as though everything was fine. He played with the children, made dinner on weekends, and even suggested a short vacation to clear the air in the house. Lorraine was equally composed, tending to the baby with a maternal warmth that looked genuine to outsiders. But Alison knew better. She saw the quick glances they exchanged, the careful way they avoided being in the same room for too long, like they were afraid of what their body language might reveal. The more Alison watched, the more obsessed she became with what they had done. She began to record everything: times they left the house, conversations overheard, even the rhythm of their footsteps down the hallway at night. She backed up text messages, photos, browser histories. She wasn't sure what she was building, only that it felt necessary. If she couldn't undo what had happened, she could at least understand the full extent of it. Then came the morning everything changed. It was a Monday. Rain fell steadily outside, drumming against the roof as a grey fog clung to the streets. Alison had just returned from dropping the kids at school when she noticed something strange. Daniel's car was still in the garage. It wasn't unusual for him to work from home, but he always moved his car into the driveway by 8 a.m. to let Lorraine out with the baby. It was nearly 10 now, and there was no sign of movement. She walked to the garage and found the door sealed tight. Inside, the air was thick, heavy. The windows of Daniel's car were fogged from the inside. Her pulse quickened as she approached. When she peered through the glass, she saw him slumped over the steering wheel, motionless. Alison screamed, banging on the window, trying to open the door, but it was locked. She ran to the kitchen, grabbed the spare key, and unlocked the car. The moment she opened the door, a wave of stale, toxic air hit her. The smell was unmistakable, exhaust fumes, even though the engine wasn't running. She called 911, her voice shaking. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but it was too late. Daniel was pronounced dead at the scene. The initial theory was suicide, carbon monoxide poisoning from a car left running in a closed space. But there were problems with that explanation. The car hadn't been running for hours. There was no key in the ignition. And most puzzling of all, the carbon monoxide readings inside the garage were unusually high for a car that hadn't been active recently. Police began asking questions. Lorraine was inconsolable, sobbing as she held the baby. Alison, surprisingly calm, told officers Daniel had seemed tired lately, withdrawn. She handed over the DNA test results when asked about possible stress factors. The investigation opened, quietly but quickly revealed disturbing inconsistencies. And slowly, the truth began to rise. The investigation into Daniel's death took a sharp turn once the medical examiner's report came back. Though the official cause was carbon monoxide poisoning, the circumstances didn't match up. The car's fuel line showed no recent activity, and security footage from nearby houses showed no lights or movement in the garage during the early morning hours when Daniel supposedly took his life. The most glaring clue, however, was the lack of fingerprints. None on the ignition, door handle, or steering wheel. It looked staged, almost surgical. Police began questioning the family more intensely. Alison told them everything she had uncovered, how she had suspected the affair, the DNA test results, and the growing tension in the house. She admitted she'd been tracking her husband's and mother's behavior for weeks, building a quiet case of her own. Investigators were intrigued by her calm demeanor and detailed accounts. She presented the file box she had hidden away, filled with receipts, text printouts, and photographs. Still, it wasn't enough to tie anyone directly to Daniel's death. Lorraine, meanwhile, was unraveling. She cried during every interview, her emotions swinging between grief and defensiveness. She insisted Daniel had been depressed, overwhelmed by guilt over the affair and fathering a child with his wife's mother. She painted him as a man who had lost control, someone who saw no way out. But the investigators weren't buying it. Too many details didn't add up. Then, in a surprising twist, Lorraine was admitted to a psychiatric facility just days after Daniel's funeral. According to the family attorney, she had suffered a breakdown, refusing to eat, speaking in riddles, and isolating herself from the baby. It was during one of her therapy sessions that she confessed, not just emotionally, but with specifics only the killer could know. She told the therapist she had done it to protect everyone. Daniel had threatened to leave, she claimed. Not just Alison, but her too. He had said he didn't want the baby, didn't want the shame, and planned to disappear and start over. Lorraine couldn't bear it. She said she had spent her life being cast aside, first by her husband, now by Daniel. In her words, he wasn't going to make me disappear again. Lorraine detailed how she had waited until Daniel fell asleep in his office, then lured him into the garage under the pretense of a conversation. She had already set up a portable generator, connected a hose to funnel the exhaust into the car. She sealed the garage doors, placed a blanket at the base to prevent fumes from escaping, and left him there, returning only hours later to lock the doors and wipe away any evidence. When the therapist reported the confession, police executed a search warrant and found the generator hidden behind a false panel in the basement. There were gloves, duct tape, and handwritten instructions matching Lorraine's story almost exactly. She was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. During the trial, she showed no emotion, staring blankly ahead as the prosecution described her actions in chilling detail. She was sentenced to life without parole. Alison, though legally cleared, lost custody of her children amid the chaos. The court ruled the home environment too toxic, too traumatizing for them to remain. The baby, born from the affair, was placed into foster care. In the end, the house was sold, the family shattered, a mother's betrayal, a husband's death, and a truth no one wanted to believe.